but taxpayers in general.
Smokers lost. People that work in jobs that require them to be exposed to secondhand smoke won. Those are the people that won. Taxpayers out there lost. How did they lose when we plowed $640 million into property tax relief from the statewide silo? I don't think there were a lot of losers this session. I think there were a lot of winners, and we focus. Let me tell you something else that was a winner, a concept that was a winner. Bipartisanship. Silo, the statewide penny on sales tax. Bipartisan in both chambers. Transportation infrastructure investments, bipartisan in both chambers. Access to health care, bipartisan in both chambers. Rather than take the approach of Washington where it's hard-edged partisanship all of the time, we actually work together. And I know it's the job of these two guys to basically say that, the world's ending and it's the end of democracy in the Western Hemisphere and all of those kinds of things, because we're getting ready now for the campaign. But the truth is, more than at any time in the last 15 years, Democrats and Republicans worked together in the legislature. And I'm proud of that record. And there were a lot of winners, and there weren't very many losers when it was all said and done. I'm not even sure smokers lose when we give them additional reasons to quit smoking.
Surprisingly, I would disagree. No, I got an email from a constituent of mine near the end of the session, and it just had 2 lines to it. It said, more taxes, more fees, less freedom. Not what I expected. And that was his summary. In the past 2 years, we've increased the state budget by $750 million. And we've increased taxes and fees on working class Iowans $700 million. That is something that is a huge concern to the working families of Iowans, especially in times of economic uncertainty. We did have Republican alternatives proposed in this particular session that did not raise taxes and fees, but still tried to meet priorities of Iowans, like road construction. Those were voted down, and I was saddened about that, because I think we could prioritize within the existing state budget to meet the needs of Iowans without, in fact, raising taxes and fees like we did. I thought there were issues that we didn't address. The number one issue that I was emailed on all session long was on a proposed marriage amendment. Now that a judge has thrown out Iowa's marriage law, there was an overwhelming number of emails to the legislature to support a constitutional amendment. We did not bring the amendment up. Illegal immigration, I was part of a task force which proposed a comprehensive approach to the illegal immigration issue, solutions that a state could implement. And we did not take that issue up. And Iowans were wondering why we were not addressing these particular issues. So I think there were a number of issues left on the table. I also think the tax and fee increases were painful for the working families of Iowa.
I think clearly the loser last session and this session is big tobacco companies, and I think that's a good thing. They have basically controlled, and incidentally, they're the largest contributors to the Republican Party. They have basically controlled the Capitol for many, many years. Tens of thousands of Iowans are dead as a result of it, as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that we were able to increase cigarettes back $1 a pack last year, which will have a reduction in those young people starting to smoke, and that we were able to go to smoke-free places to 99.9% of all public places this year. I think Iowa will be better off than tobacco companies have lost. One comment with regard to the tax increase comment is that it's to speak with you respectfully on that. The only tax increase raised by the legislature last year or this year was the cigarette tax. Okay. Some of these other arguments that taxes are going up are frankly political spin, because the Iowa economy is really chugging along right now. It's going like gangbusters. It's because of our agricultural productivity. The way our formula is, about the way the 4 classes are tied together, is that because the ag economy is on the uptick, if we do nothing over the next 5 years, there will be an increase in residential taxes. That's something we're going to have to address. And we're committed to middle-class tax relief and holding the line on taxes for the taxpayers. But this argument that we set in motion some sort of, I don't know, I've heard $900 million from Representative Rance. I just heard $700 million. I just don't know where that comes from, because we didn't do it.
Senator Gronstal, I'm going to kind of mix it up a little
Sure.
bit. You just mentioned bipartisan support. Through the session, there's a few surprises, and the one that kind of come to my mind when you said the bipartisan support was on a Thursday you declared basically Silo was dead in the Senate, and on Tuesday afternoon it runs and gets 35 votes to pass, and it will become law, or has. What transpired? I mean, you had to pick up a few Democrats, you picked up a few Republicans. Was it kind of that way with a lot of the legislation, including that piece this year?
I think I got 34 votes.
34.
I hate to quibble with you. The road use tax fund got 35 votes in the Senate. By the way, I never declared it dead. I said unless there are more Republicans willing to go along with doing something that's good for all Iowa students, it was going to be difficult for Democrats to carry that vote by themselves. So I did my job. I pressed up a few additional Republican votes for this effort, and I'm glad that the School Board Association and a host of other folks, school superintendents and teachers and parents across the state, contacted legislators and said this is a really important issue in terms of equity across Iowa, and it's good for the students in terms of. I'll tell one more story. I've got a school in Council Bluffs, Gunn Elementary School, that in 1964 they put 2 temporary portable classrooms there. They're still there. Temporary portable classrooms that they stuck at Gunn School in 1964. Well, with this legislation, those classrooms will be able to get replaced. Our generation, the baby boom generation, I'm 58, the baby boom generation is the worst generation in the history of the state for building buildings for our kids, for providing for an appropriate education for our kids. Our grandfathers did a better job during the Great Depression. Our fathers and mothers did a better job in the 60s or in the 80s during the farm crisis. I mean, you can go back to the recession of 1890. They did a better job in the 1890s. We're the worst generation in the history of the state, and last week we made up for that. We're in a position now where we'll start to do what's appropriate for our kids in this state. So I'm proud of what we did on that legislation, but I really thought it was important that it be done in a bipartisan way. And when we took it up in Ways and Means Committee, there wasn't even though one of the members of the Ways and Means Committee had committed to voting for this, there wasn't a single Republican vote for it. And I didn't want to proceed on an issue so important and so broad and so important to both urban Iowa in terms of property tax equity and rural Iowa in terms of sales tax equity. I wanted it to be done in a bipartisan way. So on a Thursday, I said this thing's in deep trouble, and it's unlikely, I said, we will proceed with this legislation without additional support from Republicans, and that additional support came through, and we passed that bill.
Were there, and we'll just start here again, were there any, in your opinion, a surprise that something like a piece of legislation passed that you maybe didn't expect it to, or that stalled and maybe be taken up next year?
Well, on the silo point, I did not think that was one of those bills that you could put it in all sorts of different configurations and come up with 40 votes in the House on any given day. But then as you started moving it around or landing, it always seemed to have trouble getting over the 50. That was one that it seemed to me stayed in that position when we came in.